Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with the life and times of Savior 28. Last week, James Smith was whisked away for some torture by the Superior Squad, and Dennis McNulty, former sidekick. Denny tried to get his old mentor to see his side or give up his cape, but that only made Jim more determined to carve a non-violent path to the future. Then a couple former adversaries showed up to take S-28 for their own plans. Issue 5's cover has the spirit of the troubled hero overlooking some somber-looking soldiers tossing down their weaponry into a pile. Spend enough time in a war zone with someone and eventually Secret Santa just becomes more predictable. In Pace Requiescat is the final chapter's title, Latin for May He Rest in Peace, and when the words are kinda switched around, the origin of the letters R.I.P. for those who have died. See, my show is educational! We begin with focus on 28's friendship with actor-director Orson Welles, as they shared many traits, not all of them glowing. Welles' star had started to fade, shunned by those who previously adored him, and shortly before his death in 1985, he warned James that people would one day turn on him. "If you're lucky, you'll inspire the voice of a cartoon mouse who wants to conquer the world." Though outwardly denying this, S-28 knew deep down Orson was right. He'd experienced backlash from the cultural shift in the 1960s, when many youths saw him as emblematic of America's problems, and trying to change his suit to match the times and throwing the peace sign around didn't really change much. His rep would recover after a few more presidents during the height of Reagan's term.
Ooh, looks like Reaganomics is making a comeback.
Love beads and head bashing weren't exactly compatible. Well, maybe not with that attitude. Welles warned that the hero's fall would be more spectacular than his own, but after they've passed away, the public will love them again and worship their genius.
But I have gone to a better place. A place filled with Mrs. Pell's fish sticks.
Dennis, who was covertly recording their chat that day, says Welles was right. Even his movies that were initially panned by critics are now regarded as masterpieces, even one director claiming everyone will always owe everything to Welles. Well, except Michael Bay. He owes everything to that one cool bottle rocket he saw explode when he was 10. The same seemed to be true about Savior 28, as his body was interred at the Capitol building, with people walking through the rain to see his coffin. Those who'd criticized, ridiculed, and dismissed him now mourning his loss. Dennis is a bit distracted by guilt and feelings that he was never anything more than a footnote in someone else's story, then regains focus by smashing an action figure of his old identity, Daring Disciple, busting off an arm and flattening its head. "Great! I definitely can't sell that on eBay now! Unless I say it's a rare battle-damaged variant. That's an easy $100 right there!" On the 1-year anniversary of 9/11, and 4 months after Queen Shakti and the Lemurian took Jimmy away, the Queen's fortress Shambhala appeared above the United Nations building in New York. "So, is your flying city parking around back, or what?" While his bosses were certain they'd intended on some kind of super terror attack, Dennis knew better. James took himself and his image too seriously and was too committed to his newfound peace activism to do that. He and Shakti had always had a thing for each other, and our narrator presumes they became frequently intimate, but admits he could be wrong, while Jim and the Lemurian always respected one another, and the latter, a sincere man-fish of faith, could tell that the flawed superhero had a genuinely good heart, as they're seen here, meditating in a big water bowl.
Naked.
Shakti had apparently gotten tired of trying to change the world by imposing her will, and came up with a new plan. Collect the greatest minds on Earth, be they scientists, artists, or philosophers, as well as thousands of sick, homeless kids from around the globe, then take off with them into space, until after humanity has destroyed itself. You might want to watch Wall-E first, might show you some pitfalls to avoid. Both James and the fish guy declined to join her, not wanting to run off and feeling too bound to Earth, respectively. Hadrock, the Lemurian, having seen a vision of his impending death, wanted to make one final attempt to save the Earth Mother, and asked 28 what he would do. He told both his ex-foes to wage peace and reach out to people without alienating them. Even for all the vitriol he's already faced, I think Jimbo would be really surprised how alienated some people can get when the message is clean up after yourself, or don't be a jerk, or think about others. But part of that is because of fake intellectuals lying for money, that human decency and empathy are bad things, while still demanding it for themselves. Jim had sent a request in advance to address the UN General Assembly, which was clearly accepted, but only he was allowed to speak. Indulging in the grand gesture he loved so much, he understands people's trepidation at the sight of Hadrock and Shakti, given their extreme methods of combating ecological disaster. But, he adds, the damage humanity has done has also been extreme. No one is beyond blame. They're not here for a fight, even if they would easily win. He recalls World War II, where each nation dehumanized the other to justify treating them inhumanely, with concentration camps, atom bombs, killing children, reducing others to wage war without guilt or shame. Today, Savior 28 says there are no labels in this room, just imperfect people he believes are essentially good. And if the US, Japan, and Germany can become allies, if he, Shakti, and the Lemurian can set aside their differences, then so can the people in the assembly.
Everybody can change!
Unfortunately, going full Rocky IV did not bring up the thunderous applause Jimmy had hoped. Despite his good heart, he was still naive, and his methods hadn't evolved, remaining two-dimensional. He offered no plan to achieve these goals, and standing next to perceived villains didn't help. 28 had united the world against his cause, with politically left and right figureheads calling him untrustworthy, a traitor who'd lost his mind. So they decided to elect him to 2 non-consecutive terms as president. Pundits repeatedly questioning Jim's sanity was like, Dennis notes slyly, following a script, because it wasn't long before the White House press secretary revealed, hesitantly, that S-28 had a mental breakdown in the 40s, as well as his years in the sanitarium, implying he'd become unhinged again.
And besides, it's government approved, so you know it's good for you.
Despite having happened decades ago, and I guess the fact that it was caused by the horrors of the Holocaust didn't make it into the news feed, people increasingly turned against him, because how dare a public figure show a sign of mental unwellness? Some still supported him, pitied his experience, but more, in a post-9/11 nation, saw him as a bigger threat than terrorist cells or foreign warlords. So they decided to elect him to 2 non-consecutive terms as president. One commentator suggested 28 be neutralized, but given he survived an H-bomb once, how would that happen? He's invulnerable, right? Well, to most things, except to that which gives him his power. The Master Stone. His longtime archenemy, Savior 13, found the last piece of the rock and created a blade, nearly killing Jimmy with it. He survived, but took months to recover, with a cover story that he was battling an alien dictator on another planet. When he was well again, he threw the knife into the sun, and when 13 died, Jim took the stone from the villain's chest and immediately destroyed it. He'd become accustomed, perhaps addicted, to the immortality he seemed to possess. He didn't want any other Master Stone pieces used against him, but he forgot about the one in Dennis's gut, surgically removed and fashioned into the bullets he'd later use, which he recalls while looking a bit overwhelmed by some sudden realization. Ah, jeez, was I supposed to tip the surgeon? 2 months after their address at the UN, Shakti is ready to take off for space, since that speech didn't seem to change anyone's mind. She asks 28 to join her, but as the Lemurian had, he declines, also preferring Jimmy because he didn't consider himself a savior. They kiss, and before he leaves, he thanks her for believing in him, which she always did. With the exception of that skateboarding video game you launched, you kinda had that lawsuit from Tony Hawk coming. He then visits the Lemurian, who confirms via the Queen's doctors that he has an untreatable aggressive form of cancer. He's lived a long, satisfying life and tells S-28 to keep protecting the Earth. Jim says those days are over, but the man-fish isn't so sure, as he dives into the sea to spend his few remaining months. He assumed his illness was from the pollution dumped into the water, but as Dennis later learned, it was man-made specifically for him, likely being infected when he was at the UN. As she promised, Shakti started taking Shambhala into space, but it was hit with a nuke before it ever left the atmosphere. The debris collected by the government, and maybe some of the charred remains of all those innocent people taken with it. Jimmy had witnessed this, looking like a horrified John Cena, and then went quiet for a while. Denny's bosses hoped he had finally gone underground, as advised last issue, until February 2003, when he led a flash mob outside a mall to a cover of Avril Lavigne's Complicated. He showed up on Larry King, and should have been wrapped around a broken limb because he was plastered. He contradicted official claims that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and shamed the media for going along with whatever the government said. And then, on public TV,
Okay, I'm gonna head over here to vomit.
he tried starting up his rallies again, but his audience was considerably smaller, consisting largely of people there to mock him and flip him the bird. Yet the powers that be knew he was still too powerful to be left unchecked. We get a page of the events we've seen so far, from when Savior 28 saved his sidekick, the peace rallies, his torture, and lapsed Catholic Dennis praying in a church in front of votive candles, suggesting he may have lit one for what he did, all bookended by panels right before the shot and when it was taken. It's like a quick montage of his experiences with James in the moment before squeezing the trigger, kinda like someone's life flashing before their eyes, with a clever, if grim, twist. We go to his funeral, where even Black Rat, who'd brutally interrogated him, was openly weeping. Dennis made sure Julia was there, not for being the daughter of Jimmy's longtime love, but for probably being his one true friend. The various supers figured that S-28's whole peace campaign was a front to take down some sinister, villainous plot, unable to grasp how the first and greatest of them could abandon their fight. Meanwhile, the talking heads in the media and politics, who'd previously slandered the guy, remembered that words have meaning, that a single human life can have extraordinary impact, and perhaps they still had hearts. That line of pundits having introspection is how you know this takes place in a fictional universe. It's as if we have some collective need to slay the dreamers so that the rest of us can remind ourselves that we haven't lost our capacity to dream. Are Post-it notes really that expensive, people? An hour after the assassination of Savior 28, the UN quickly and unanimously passed a resolution calling for all conflicts within and between all nations to end for 60 seconds. This minute of world peace was imperfect, like Jim. There were some attacks that resulted in many fatalities, but millions more lowered their weapons or stopped to pray the moment his casket was lowered. Even though in the 6 months since people have, shall we say, reverted to type, again, like Jimmy, he'd have considered it a start. Our narrator, however, he doesn't believe the world is going to change, and even if it did, Dennis Michael McNulty wouldn't belong in it. He closes by repeating how he loved, hated, and wanted to be Savior 28, the only hero he ever had, and never figured he'd be the one to kill him, as he takes the gun from his drawer and ends his own life, with Jimmy's action figure in his hand. To clarify, I did edit that page to omit the more graphic portions of this sequence while still getting the overall point across. His testimony is being read 5 years later by James, who was regenerated by the Master Stone, to an extent. He's in a wheelchair, has a beard, and is showing signs of aging, suggesting he's not as super as he used to be. Now working with Julia at For the People, he'd like to visit Denny's grave in Virginia, which Jules will accommodate, but for now, they have an Easter dinner to serve in the dining hall. As they start handing out meals, Julia asks if he misses the spotlight, which James admits, yeah, he does sometimes, as he holds his chest, but he's getting used to changing the world one heart at a time, as the series ends on the spirit of Savior 28 imposed valiantly above the shelter. That was the life and times of Savior 28, and it was one of the best comics I've read in a long time. It's superhero deconstruction that really gets you thinking, without twisting an existing hero into something dark, gritty, or realistic, or saying that the mainstream heroes we love are somehow bad. Sure, 28 is very obviously a Superman XP, with the wholesome public persona and abilities that change or evolve like they did for Big Blue, though we don't get much on his backstory, and what we do get is largely contradictory, like where his parents came from or how he got empowered. I imagine that might be a reference to how origins can get changed up over time in this medium. All we do know is that he was a soldier who ran into hard times and somehow got to be the one success in Project Savior that didn't die or go crazy evil like his Bizarro-esque opposite number. Wherever it came from, I guess the Master Stone was superstitious, because 13 was really not a lucky number. Characters feel genuinely complex, flawed in some way, but not horrible people. James ignored sound advice or twisted it to affirm what he already thought, and drove Dennis away. He truly wanted to do good, but didn't think everything through, let his ego get the better of him, and was not the most emotionally healthy, possibly due to the era he grew up and matured in. As much as he wanted the spotlight, he clearly had empathy for others if the horrors of a concentration camp traumatized him for so long, Samantha had little tolerance of people on the political right, but didn't let that keep her from helping others regardless of ideology. Shakti wanted a better world, but her use of force wasn't doing her any favors. The Lemurian wanted to defend the oceans that were being poisoned, but he didn't enjoy fighting. Dennis's feelings are conflicted throughout, which lets him call out the BS from others, especially James, but also when his own cynicism starts filling in the gaps of what he doesn't know. Like being able to tell that S-28 and Shakti had the hots for each other and likely hooked up, but couldn't confirm and stated as much. Not to mention, for all his calling out of Jim's embellishments, he was not above lying himself, like covering for Jimmy's sake after he let him leave Skytop. He made those fatal shots because he was ordered to, for his job, but deep down it seemed he knew it was wrong. Even as a lapsed Catholic, he went to church over this, wanting some higher power to guide him, struggling with not wanting a savior, costumed or otherwise, but not being able to live with himself. It should go without saying, this is definitely not for kids, and probably shouldn't be read by anyone suffering with suicidal ideation or similar conditions. Maybe it's unintentional, but I think I see some biblical parallels. Denny was a betrayer that later took his own life, like Judas. The guy he backstabbed died and came back. Not sure if it was after 3 days in this case, but hey, the story ends on Easter.
We're through the looking glass here, people.
The art is really good, with something of a Darwin Cook vibe to it, and it really helps the story being told. Not just with great designs for characters. Yeah, Jimmy does look a lot like All Might, doesn't he? You also have the use of colors for certain scenes that are maudlin or horrific, as well as some foreshadowing. In Book 1, our narrator pops the head off a Savior 28 action figure, only for him to be revealed by the end of it that he was the shooter. Then, when he sadly self-terminates, he's clearly repaired that figure, taping the head back on, and holds it in the end, while his own figure is left broken, as if to represent how Jim did come back, if not exactly how he used to be, but McNulty didn't. It also feels very symbolic of how he felt. For all his problems with his mentor, he did care about him, but was clearly overwhelmed with self-loathing over what he did, not really feeling himself very important. Expressions aren't too exaggerated, but can add a lot to what someone is feeling, like the gradual progression from anguish to something more positive when S-28 realizes he truly does believe in his new crusade of peace. Or how he lashes out in anger, simply because he's tired of the same fights every single day that never seem to make things better, only further damaging him inside. Or as some might recognize it, working for more than 5 years in retail. Also, Dennis may be modeled after Jack Kirby. He definitely looks a lot like Dan Turpin from Superman the Animated Series to me, and he was based on Kirby, so strong possibilities, all I'm saying. Some might jump to the idea that this story is political, but I would disagree. Yes, it brings up some politics. One politician or another may not be shown in the best light. Again, people are flawed, which is a big element at work here, just like how difficult it is for people to change. It's much more societal, sociological. It doesn't try to say that, for example, a no-kill rule is bad or shouldn't be attempted, only that there needs to be more than just some positive affirmations to back it up. For all his good intentions, Jim's a little short-sighted and reckless, which can lead to loss of life he would want to prevent, even if events didn't happen exactly as Denny figured. His hope that speaking to the UN would get leaders to aspire to nonviolence didn't come with an outline for how to achieve it. Heroes and villains pummel each other over and over again in an endless, redundant cycle while people still get hurt, killed, starve, or live in poverty. They have the power to change that, but they're too busy kicking the nefarious Peter Payne in the face. Comics, gotta love it. Or they buy into their own hype and get distracted by all the adulation. Which leads me to another aspect throughout the series that I think makes it feel extra relevant today: the use of propaganda. It's what got Jimmy believing that all he needed was his costume and inflections of orators of his day to get people to change their ways. He didn't consider the need to unlearn what he was told in order to commit to a more pacifist life when confronted by aggression. That, despite all his abilities, he was still human. I'm not just talking about what the scientists and politicians told him over the years to inflate his ego, but the fabrications that he was on secret missions to hide the fact he was in traction, or Dennis filling in for him while he was in the sanitarium. Still technically lying, but one could argue they were for better reasons. All that contributed to 28's belief that he could make anything happen effortlessly, which we see was not the case. He believed a good story was better than telling the truth, and could even lead someone to it. When you think about it, that's kind of what writers do. They try to get a point across by creating a narrative, making characters believable and appealing to the audience in some way, and use allegories to help us understand what they're getting at. Star Trek, Steven Universe, X-Men, all modern examples of using fanciful imagery to get people thinking about the real world they're in.
Dumb police! You're dumb!
To varying degrees of success. Propaganda was eventually used against him, as when all the talking heads kept questioning his sanity, coincidentally, just before his first mental breakdown was made public. Like 28 said of the good versus evil fights, it was meant to distract the populace, as well as turn them against their hero. It's an example of creating exciting or fun narratives for negative purposes, like podcasters who just ask questions but don't actually bother seeking any answers, because the scandalous and made-up stories are much more profitable. The book doesn't get into what it is Cheney assumed Jimmy knew that made him and his peaceful preaching a target, but given that Larry King interview, one could assume it had something to do with invading Iraq, and boy is that a touchy subject to say the least. Nothing is specified, so maybe it's meant for the reader to decide, but I feel like the VP assumed S-28 knew everything was not on the up and up and wanted him taken care of before he interfered or something, though it was 2 years between Cheney warning Dennis and Jim's drunken chat with Larry, so either they tried a lot of stuff to discredit him or I'm off base here. Sure, James said he saw that there were no WMDs, but on the other hand, he's been shown to be naive, never seemed to ask a lot of questions, didn't exactly meet with Saddam to start a fight, has been known to stretch the truth, and it's not like he has X-ray vision or anything, so maybe this is akin to an unreliable narrator. But I digress. There are some things left unexplained, like the Master Stone's origins, which I think is fine left a mystery, but I would have liked a little more info on Dennis's time as Savior 28. Give us a more informed context to the alleged resentment Jim had against him. Though maybe it's enough that a guy who loved attention felt it was being stolen from him, even if circumstances kind of necessitated it. It did leave me wondering about the details of Jim's revival. Like, did he bust his way out of his own grave and start losing his powers afterwards? Maybe we're not supposed to think about it. Nevertheless, when all is said and done, we saw a man struggle to change, find a better way, only to be met with opposition even from the people he thought he could trust, who tried to do everything alone, his way, even when trying to bring others in. He'd achieved such great heights only to crash down, but in a twist of fate was given a second chance to still be a hero. Maybe not an invincible nigh immortal in a flashy costume, but one who does what he can for those most in need, driven by the words now hanging in the charity center he works in. That which is most needed is a loving heart. So, what'd the Buddha say about warhammers? I highly recommend this book. The visuals are great, the storytelling is compelling, using a non-linear style to excellent effect, and is genuinely thought-provoking. If you're looking for some smart superhero meta-commentary that isn't Watchmen, this may be the book for you. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.